Ladies and gentlemen, and all genders outside and in between, welcome to the brand new podcast, Thirsty Work, a podcast about sex education and, well, a little bit of hedonism, with my guest this evening, Ruby True. Ooh, it's Thirsty Work. Hello there, you wonderful specimens of humankind. How are you doing, you glorious individuals? I hope you're all doing very, very well. We are here today for the first ever episode of Thirsty Work. Yes, the brand new podcast to do with sex education, a little bit of hedonism. We'll touch on all kinds of subjects. Why? Because we can, and it's kind of my thing. My guest this evening is the beautiful, the amazing Ruby True. Let me bring her in. Well, there you are. Hello, Ruby. How are you doing, you beautiful individual?
Hello, how you doing? I'm good.
I'm good. It's good. We only had a mild technical issue kicking things off, but we're doing all right. Ruby was actually the person that coerced me into starting the podcast in the first place, you beautiful human being. But before we go any further, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody what it is that you get up to?
Hello. My name is Ruby True. Right now, for the last 5 or so years, I have been a streamer on Twitch. I kind of call it like my second life because I have a past life. My past life is something very different. So now I stream ASMR, sound therapy, relaxingness. I used to stream games, and in my past life, which is still very much part of me, and I love all of it. I used to be a model, sideshow performer, and believe it or not, like toured around the world in fetish clubs. And yeah.
And this is the reason why me and Ruby get on so well. We actually met at a Twitch London event many moons ago, and I literally just walked up and was like, "You look interesting. We should discuss things. Hello, how are you doing?"
I was like unfazed completely.
I was like, what? Okay, this is peculiar. This is amazing. But we're not here to talk about our wonderful history. We're here to talk about sex and deviance and filth wizardry. Because as we have definitely discussed in many times across the entirety of life, sex education is pretty damn awful, isn't it? Right?
I think sex education is just so mixed up, and sex for like teenagers and going into a young adult, it's all mixed up with so many things now, with sex sells, and that has put so many messages out there about sex.
Oh, hugely so. And it's one of those things as well, like when you actually break down into it, you've got so many people with so many self-consciousness issues. Confidence is the word I'm looking for. Self-confidence issues. And it's what is the founding of that? Because I've been reading a few sex ed books recently, and one of the ones, Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, which I've been hugely promoting recently because it's so good. But they talk about the fact that everyone thinks babies are beautiful. When you see a child, an infant child, you're just like, "Ah, bless your cotton socks." But between the age of 3, when children gain some description of self-awareness, and the age of I don't know, 14, when they start sort of becoming a bit more interested in other people other than themselves, there's so much that society drills into them about how they are not good enough. And that's exactly what you were saying about sex sells and stuff. It's strange.
Not only how they're not good enough, but how they're perceived as a human being.
Yeah.
So from a female point of view, I knew very early on that I was perceived as sexual.
Oh, I was also so when was that? What age are we talking?
We're talking primary school.
Oh, really?
So
it was that early.
Yeah, and I think especially for women, most girls, you're aware that your period's coming soon, and you're aware of what that is and your body. And I think not to dig on guys, but I think that that's why women are a little bit ahead when it comes to sexual maturity, because we're so very quickly thrown into this idea of you have sex, you have a baby. You know, you're going to have periods. If you have sex, you're going to have a baby. And this whole scary, like,
Yeah, because
this thought
it's
of,
super interesting as well, especially for a cis guy like myself. Like being in a situation, because I found out about periods when I was like, I don't know, 14, 15 maybe, and I just assumed that like cis men, cis women, or people with vulvas and people with penises like grew at the same rate. So the times that I was like getting my first erections at like 13 or whatever it was, 12, 13, I was just like, oh, well, now is the time that everyone with a vulva is obviously having their first period. But then, like, growing older, I realized that some people get it at like 8 years old or something like
yeah,
that. It's
which is
it can
why
be,
I was really aware, because being in school, some girls had already started.
yeah.
And so they would then talk to the other girls and we would know about it. And so, like, my first sex education, I would say, came from a girls' magazine. I'm going to show my age here now, called Sugar.
Okay, okay.
There was this girls' magazine called Sugar, and it was actually really good. And do you know what the sad thing is? I now think that people wouldn't allow that magazine to that age group because it's too much. But for me, it was at the right time. It was like, my body is changing. Why is my body changing? Why are other girls having these periods and they're talking about it to me? But there was no like education until, like you say, until you're about 13, 14. It's not until you get a pamphlet thrown at you and you're like, this is sex, be safe.
Well, this
Like,
is this is the thing. Like, I actually consider myself really lucky because my parents took me aside. In fact, probably about the same time, about the same time that I got my first erection, and I've talked about this quite a few times, so I have absolutely no shame, as well you know. But it's like my first erection freaked me out. I can only imagine what it must be like when for people with vulvas who bleed, and it's just like what that must be like if you're not prepared for it and you're not ready for it. No one's told you that that's coming, and suddenly you just start bleeding. But it freaked me out. I remember running into my parents' like bedroom and being like, "What's it doing?" and desperately trying to push it down, and like just like trying. I was like, "Why is it doing this? I don't understand." And my parents are pissing themselves, just absolutely in completely understandable. They didn't know what was happening. Like they were just like, "Look, Valen, if you leave it alone, it'll go. Stop touching it. Stop playing with it.
go away.
It'll go away. It'll go away.
It's literally got its own brain.
It literally does. It freaked me out. It was so weird, like having that level of just unknownness to it, of what the hell it was. And then my parents took me and my younger sister aside and were like, okay, let's have a discussion about these things. Very like I was raised Catholic, so a lot of it was very much okay. When a man and a woman love each other
Yeah.
very much. Now, my parents are really open-minded and like neuromantics anyway, so they never were like too forceful with it. But I think that my parents, especially my mother, was, I don't know, conscious of making us embarrassed of that
Sex,
idea.
of the
Yeah.
idea. Yeah. I think I guess so. You're comparing an erection to like a period. And for women or people that have wombs and bleed, it's, for me right then, that was not related to sex.
Okay.
That the thought of, I was aware that that's what it meant, that if I had sex, I could have a baby. But for me, that was not related to sex. I didn't really start to feel like, oh, actually, I'm attracted to boys and I find this, like, this whole, the sexual urge, the
Yeah.
feelings, until like a few years later.
And
And
did
I
you?
remember, sorry, I was gonna say, I remember
No,
when
sorry.
I first like was in primary school, when people were like maybe getting their periods and stuff. My parents bought me this book called The Body Book, does anyone remember the body book? It would literally talk about farts and everything your body did, like in such a ridiculous,
No.
comical way. Oh, I used to take this to school along with Sugar magazine. I
Oh,
was like,
classic.
I was like the dealer on the playground of random magazines and deviant things, which were not even deviant, they were just factual. And I remember hiding in the milk shed with a Sugar magazine, which was talking about, literally, I remember it had a picture of like what it would be like when a guy would insert himself, and it would say like, it's all going to be fine, like you're going to stretch, and don't let someone tell you this, like don't let someone tell you that. Like, it was good, and it was aimed at a very early teen magazine. And I guess I was lucky in the fact my parents were just like, yeah, you can have this magazine. Like, they would look at it. I'd leave it around.
It's interesting because you say about like how they probably never get away with it in this day and age, but then you've got like TV shows like Sex Education and Big Mouth and stuff, and like Big Mouth is very much based around like, I haven't seen too many of the episodes, but it does seem it's like, oh, Family Guy style cartoons. It's designed for the younger ages, and it's like, oh, by the way, this is puberty and all the things that'll fuck you up doing that, you know?
Yeah, I think I've watched Big Mouth. I think things have come along really far and things haven't at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's something to do with like the social evolution of like social media? Like, as much as social media's got a whole load of negative things about it, it has allowed people like the social evolution of like gender. Not saying that obviously the other genders like non-binary and agender and stuff like that didn't exist before, but they were just less known about, and there wasn't necessarily terminology for them before. But like, do you think this revolution of understanding ourselves as humans and the fact that it's so easy to find that you're not alone because the internet has allowed so much more? Whereas we didn't have that growing up.
The whole, I'm going to put it in inverted commas because I just hate the word, the whole wokeness thing.
Oh.
It's, there's very much two camps, and I don't want to go into politics, but it runs very deeply into politics and core beliefs. And I'm hoping that as, you know, the millennials are the new parents of the new generation, you know, that soon things will grow and change, but you only know what you're told, you know? So if you're brought up being told something's wrong or something's weird, or, you know, you're only going to grow up with that. But I'm hoping that, there's a very divided camp of people. Gets very complicated, like politics, religion, like people, you think like sex is just like opens so many like doors and questions. And especially when it comes to sex education, I saw a YouTuber who makes like family safe sex education. Just her talking to the camera. She's a doctor. I
think I know.
Very, very factual. She was amazed to find that some teachers had found her videos really useful because she explained things really well.
Yeah.
And that parents had complained and were trying to get her banned from schools. And she's had she's been like had complaints from parents and things. And it's like, what are you hiding? At the end of the day, you as parents had sex to make a child, and whatever trauma you've had, don't push that onto your kids. Like, let them 100%. Grow up in a healthy way and learn all the things. Like, rather learn it from mum and dad. Like, my parents were very chill. I hope they're not watching. But my parents were always very chill when I was like younger about the whole thing. You know, as I grew up, I never felt embarrassed about anything. And my embarrassment from sex actually came from relationships and what other people put
You see,
onto
this
you.
is that's really interesting dynamic because my the reason why I became such a deviant, such a colossal deviant, is because I was such a nervous young teen. And I remember being like, I remember because I'd have the conversation with our parents about like what sex was and the fact that it was there to make babies, but it was also a relationship thing. And I was like, okay, this is really, really interesting. But then I was like, oh, I'm never going to get with anybody anyway. And then I was like, well, on the off chance that I do get with somebody, I need to know all the things about pleasure. I need to know everything in order to make sure that when they are with me, they fully understand that I am the one for them, which is hilarious in hindsight. But that's
That's amazing though, because I don't think many young men think like that. They just think on their side of of things. They don't think
yeah.
about the giving side of things.
There was definitely a pressure growing up as a cis man in like especially like during the 90s where it was like, oh, you gay, you gay, you gay, and people weren't like at a point where people were turning around and being like, and what is your, how is this offensive? Like, I don't understand. They like, gay people are fantastic, what is your issue? um but yeah, it was that whole thing, like if you hadn't like touched a girl's private parts by a certain age, then you were falling behind. And there was always a thing about dick size. Jesus Christ. Like,
It's I laugh, but it's actually really sad. Like I laugh, but I've seen it in like my ex doesn't watch Twitch, but it actually affected him
just
mentally. I
the
could tell.
self-consciousness.
Yeah, like to the point that he actually bought some of the crap off of those adverts, and I found it hidden.
What, like pumps and pills and stuff?
Yes,
Oh wow.
like
Friends.
one of those stretching things.
Yeah, I've seen a whole load of them, and I'm not going to turn around and say they work or don't work. I've not looked into them myself,
I
but I've
don't know
seen
the
ones.
science, but
The
that
science
yeah.
is skeptical at best from what I have from the little I have researched. But there's like elastic that you tie around it and then tie it to the bottom of your knee so it pulls every time you walk. And there's like full on like pumps and stuff. It's weird. They get really
So if you
inventive.
ever see a guy walking down the road, yeah, looking like
Just
his dick's attached to his knee.
maybe that's the reason why you get those people who are just constantly rearranging themselves in the down the thing. You're just like, oh, okay, hold on. You're just playing the little banjo down there. Is what's going on here?
But it's really quite sad. Like
Yeah,
I think a lot of people don't think about how all these things affect guys, and I think a lot of women are very quick to be like, oh, porn's like, I'm jumping ahead here, but like porn's just
okay.
made for men and all of this, and like it's all just made for men. Women are made to be objects for men. Everything's about men's pleasure, blah blah blah. But men are fed the this other side that if they're not big enough or they're not like they're
You've
not
got
good
to be
enough,
manly
then
enough. You've got to do the
yeah,
workouts and
manly
stuff like
enough.
that.
Yeah, you've got to
It's
look a certain way to be sexy, and it's like we're both not winning in these situations because at the end of the day, are you actually having good sex?
and
Like,
this is the thing. This is the real thing. Like I remember going on a show on Twitch many like when I'd first started streaming many moons ago, and I went on this show, and one of the first questions they always asked you was, "What's your body count?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I don't count. I don't like that. They're not numbers. They're not notches on a bedpost, and they never really have been to me. Mainly because when I was younger, I was like lucky to have a kiss. Never mind anything else. Good lord, could you imagine? But yeah, it was like, what's your body count? And I was like, realistically speaking, I would much rather be remembered than have a big body count. It quality over
yeah.
quantity. And like people are like, oh yeah, I've slept with 50, 60, 70 girls. I'm like, how many of them remember you? And
I
more
was
to the
gonna
point,
say
how
that
many of them
doesn't mean you're
remember you
good.
fondly? Yeah, like
Yeah, it's like
you've
yeah,
done a lot of
that
things.
that number means absolutely nothing whether you've slept with one person or like 100 people.
Yeah.
You could have had 100 bad sexes. What's the word?
100 bad sexes.
100 bad. I was going to say shags, but then I'm like, not in the 70s.
I mean, shags works. Coital engagements.
Or you could have been with one person many times, and each time you spent a long time in having a nice time.
But that's the thing. That's the thing that's so mind blowing to me, is the fact that every body is different. Like literally every single human form is different. What works for some people doesn't work for others. And as somebody who is very enthusiastic about like exploring bodies and stuff, to the point where people have criticized me and been like, you don't want to sleep with me. I'm like, no, I do. I'm just so intrigued by what makes you tick. What is it that's gonna what's gonna hit that point where you're just like, yeah, this is it. This is where it's at. It's there's so many different things that make different people tick, and I am all about finding all of them, because there's so like it is, and obviously then when you find like the world of fetish as you grow older, you're like, oh my god, there's even more things that make. It's not just a case of these are sensitive areas and these work. There's like people with tickle fetishes and people with Hawaiian shirt fetishes and God knows what. It's just like amazing. It's such an amazing world that and people are just like, oh yeah, I've slept with 200 people. Oh, okay, that's great. Like if they all enjoyed it and it was all great and fun and dandy, there's nothing wrong with that by any stretch of the imagination. But that doesn't make you any better than this person that slept with one person.
But what makes someone good at sex? Like, you could sleep with one person and they could say you're bad, and then you could sleep with another person and they could say you're good. And it's just that compatibility and that, like, this is where, I was thinking about it earlier in the shower. This is where sex gets mixed up, like, there is just sex, like over here. Sex, big neon signs. Sex. Penetration.
Okay. Well, we PIV, which is penis like in vagina. Yes.
Most people think of the most normal, I'm going to say vanilla people.
Yes.
And then there's like, over here, there's like sensuality and all of those things that come along. Like even fetish can be sensual, even when like people think, oh, like if someone's got a fetish and it's a bit hardcore, there's still sensuality in that, and care and like consideration and all of those things that make good relationships and good experiences. And I think a lot of people miss that, especially online. So this is like what led me to this thought while I was in the shower. I had a sponsor from a sex toy company, and they sent me a box of sex toys, which was amazing. A box of free sex toys, and I got paid. So I did a couple of live Instagrams, and there was lots of women in there, and I was chatting to women, and we were chatting about what we liked about things. And then there were like every now and then horny guy 123 would turn up and be like, I don't believe in sex toys because, you know, they're just going to take over. Or another horny guy would turn up and be like, oh, baby, use that for me. Are you going to use that for me now? And it's the
entitlement. Wow.
It's that difference though of, you're entering a space and you're completely misreading the room, that like we were having a nice conversation, and there were guys in there that were like, this is a really interesting conversation because I've never heard women talk about sex and pleasure.
Yeah.
And this one guy was like, I'm going to use your code and go buy my wife some toys. I'm really excited for her.
That's amazing.
And there were just two types of men, and it really struck out to me. And it's that two types of sex. Again, you know, that thought of pleasure and sensuality and owning your pleasure, especially as a woman, and then the just bish bash bosh.
It's, do you know what, bringing into the sex toys side of things, you're right. There is the two campaigns of pleasure and sensuality versus conquests, I suppose, is probably the best way of putting it.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
Like that's the way they see it. It's like, oh well, I have conquested these people. Have you really? Is that a thing? Anyway, the sex toy side of things is really interesting though, because I definitely had an ex nearly 10 years ago now, who we didn't have many arguments. One of the arguments we did have was about the fact that she believed that I didn't want to have sex with her because I was so infatuated with causing pleasure with sex toys, which is a really bizarre dynamic when I think back on it. And the reason why, I know exactly the reason why, because I was 21 at the time, and I still had these bugbears in my mind of the idea that people with penises just weren't, they like, because it takes so much more for somebody with a vulva to climax than it does somebody with a penis, and because of that entire dynamic in my brain, I was like, and the fact that I thought that sex was all about the climax. I didn't think it was anything. It was just like, you have sex to have this climax, and that is it. Like, I was like, I need to make sure that she has the climax, like I've had the climax, or I'm about to have the climax. I need to make sure that that is going to happen so that we're on equal terms, almost. Mm-hmm. But as a result of that, because I didn't think I could do it myself, I was like, I'll use all of these sex toys. And I tell you what, friends, sex toys is a very expensive hobby. But
it's the equivalent of, hang on, I was going to say, is it the equivalent of someone starting out stream and that they're going to get big because they're going to buy all of the equipment?
Yeah.
I've got the best mic, I've got the best camera, I've got the best PC. Like, why is nobody watching me?
Yeah, I've got a £10,000 rig, and yet I don't understand.
It's the same thing. You're compensating for like everything with sex toys. Yeah,
and that was the thing. That was one of the downfalls of. I mean, one of the downfalls was just lack of communication in general. But like, one of the downfalls of the relationship was definitely down to the fact that I was so infatuated with pleasure on so many levels, and because of that, I basically like end up treating her like a test subject, I suppose. Even though I was completely in love with her, even though I was completely infatuated with her, and all I wanted to do was make her have ecstatic moments. Like, all I really wanted, like, there was points where I was just like sat upright and I was just doing things, playing her like a piano, just going all right.
The connection part, and just being you will orgasm.
Yeah, missing the entire intimacy and just being like, okay, now is the time that you will orgasm. Let's go. Just fuck, what is wrong with me? But and it's good because like that experience obviously taught me something. I've moved on, and these things do you know what I mean? Regardless of how good or bad an experience is, you move forward.
I think one of the main things that's always been a surprise to most like men that I've said, I don't know if it's just me, I think it's a lot of women. I can only speak for women, but we don't always have to reach the climax to have a good time.
No.
And I think that's like a really hard thing for a lot of, because we both our bodies work so differently.
Yeah.
That it's such an alien thing for a lot of cis men to understand.
You see, you say it is. However, it turns out in my investigations, it turns out that there's a difference between like a penis arriving and somebody with a penis orgasming. So like, it actually happens either slightly before or slightly after. But that is the reason why it is entirely possible for somebody to have run out of like semen production but still hit those orgasmic moments. And it's also possible to completely finish and not have that release at all. And I'm definitely one of those people that have done it, where I have had sex and just completely missed, like just done it, and it's like, okay, there's the end, and I am still very tense.
So is that another one of those things that we're all fed, that like you must, like how we were talking about earlier, how guys think they need to be big to be, masculine and good at it. It's like another one of those things that we're all kind of fed that, I'm learning.
Well, this is the thing, and this is one of the reasons why I was so enthusiastic about doing this podcast and stuff, is because it gives me a reason, it gives me an excuse to dig deeper on these things. But the other thing is, like, I'd say one of the big things, and naturally I can't fully, like, I can't speak for everybody, but there is a big thing, especially with cis men, and it comes into that whole toxic masculinity stuff that we were talking about, where if there is an issue, you do not talk about it. You do not talk about it. Like, you are more ashamed of buying Viagra than you will be of a porn magazine. Like, there's that kind of, and like, impotence is a big thing. And the thing is that, like, I remember the first time that, like, I was with somebody and we were very, very eager, and I just couldn't perform by any stretch of imagination. And I remember the shame around it. The absolute shame. And the fact of the matter is that my brain was well up for it. My body was just like, nah, now is not the time, Mr. V. Now is the time for just chilling out and stuff. Why are you doing? No, stop this. No, stop this. What is wrong with you?
And I think on the flip side, as a woman, the equivalent to that would be the faking it thing. Whole.
Yes.
You might tell your friends, your girlfriends, like, oh, like, I don't know. It was like you fake it to make them feel good.
Yeah. And I definitely have a friend who had
and just to make it end. That sounds terrible.
It does sound terrible, but it's true. It's true.
Just to make it end, and it feeds into, like, the guy's ego, but then as a woman, you would never, ever talk about pleasure for yourself and be proud of it. Like, up until the last few years, like, I think that's something that the younger generation are doing quite well. Like, I've seen a lot of tweets and things, people in their 20s, early 20s, just being like, I just bought this vibrator and it's the best, ladies. You should all buy it. Like, I could imagine being 19, 20 and saying that would be the bizarrest. Like, it's something really... you'd hide in a sock drawer and
yeah. But this shame is really interesting. Oh, I say really interesting. I'm very interested in a lot of things, as you might have been able to guess, because I remember, I remember growing up and stuff, and it was always in my mind that sex toys were for cis women. That is it. There was nobody else. Nobody ever used them for anything else. It was just cis women. Here is a rampant rabbit and onwards.
That's the first one I ever got, was a rampant rabbit.
It was the only one everyone knew.
Sat there with this thing, looking at it, like, it would just, like, spin and do things at me, and I would look at it and be like, is that meant to be sexy? I'm so glad that it's become more common and more open, and they're, like, nice and sleek and beautiful now and rechargeable and, like, pretty, and in certain places, like, the shops that sell them look like Apple shops.
Yeah.
Like, they're just, like, beautiful things, like, sitting there. But yeah, years ago, like, the seedy shops of Ann Summers would be, like, the place that you'd go that would feel slightly place. Like, safe. But then I'd go in, like, other, like, I was the kind of person that as soon as I was 18, I was like, I'm going in those doors. I'm going to look what's in those places and see what's in there. This is an experience. Like,
I definitely snuck in before that and got kicked out a couple of times. And they were just like, have we got any ID? And I'm like, yeah, of course I do. It's fine.
I still like, TwitchCon was in Berlin a couple of years ago. And I went in, like, every shop. There's still some of those shops are stuck in, like, the 90s. They're hilarious. Like, they felt really vintage. And some of the things you can buy. But you know what? If it's making someone else happy and they're enjoying it, like, and it's completely harmless,
Yeah, but this is the thing. Like I was saying about, like, you're right. It's complete. It's all about the enjoyment. It's all about the and that's the reason why sex toys were invented at the end of the day. Or more to the point, have been propagated. They were invented for hysteria, but
Yeah, that's a whole other
that's an
conversation.
entirely different conversation.
But yeah,
But
I've
I
cured my
remember.
depression.
Yeah, yay! Orgasms for the win. Um, but it's really interesting because, like, I remember getting my first, like, sex toy for a penis. It was, and because there was loads of, like, little fleshlights, little fanny in a cans, as I always called them, because they were ridiculous. There was just like a pot and like a hole that you could do stuff with, and I was just like, what is this?
Have you seen the
Um,
ones in Japan? Sorry, I'm going off
that's
topic.
that's what I've got. I've got a Tenga, which is like super high tech, and I remember buying it and being like, I shouldn't own this. This is not something that people have, because there is that propagation of understanding, again, back down to the toxic masculinity, that, and I think I've actually said this to you before, actually, Ruby. It's like, cis women are expected to not put out, so not to have sex with whoever they want to have sex with, obviously consensually and stuff, but are expected to have loads of sex toys and pleasure themselves with sex toys. And cis men are expected to never need a sex toy for pleasure, because they're obviously drowning in, insert variety of lewd words here.
In women.
Yes. And it's
But
just like, what? Why?
I
Why?
saw someone tweet this once, and it was like, men are so confused. They want their wife to be a virgin, but they want her to be experienced. But yet they also want to have slept with like 100 people before they get married. And they're like, where do we exist? Like,
Yeah,
where do we fit in this
100%.
masculine ideal world of sex? Which brings us back to the beginning of sex sells, and mostly the female form has been used as the sex selling like proponent, which I actually have no issue with, except for like years ago when it used to be like attached to something that was totally non-sexual. Like,
Yeah.
perfume can be sexy, clothes can be sexy, your car, why do you need a woman on it? like
The
like
Cadbury's caramel bunny. Why are you here?
yeah, it's like using that female thing just as a prop, like being seen as like an object, which comes back to the fact that we can't be in control of our own pleasure, and the idea to be proud of our pleasure, and it's like, no, you must be the sexy object.
But you know what? It's even worse than that. And this is where it gets really bizarre, and something that I've only relatively found out recently, is that people. So there was a big thing a little while ago where there was cis men complaining. It was like, oh, there's loads of stuff out there for women in movies and bits and pieces. Look at this person, he's topless. Look at this person, he's ripped with muscles. Look at this person, he's bench pressing stuff. And then like there was loads of women just going, that's not for us, that's for
Oh
you.
yeah, for you, yeah.
We're interested in hands and collarbones and jawlines and stuff.
Oh,
Like,
like my first crushes were like totally like femme boy types,
yeah,
like what guys don't think is attractive, like Brian Molko,
yeah.
and like put a guy in a skirt and some eyeliner.
That was my
And when I,
entire teenage years. I was just like, I want to be that androgynous goth boy. That is what I
yeah,
want.
like that's what I found attractive. Do you know what? What I find attractive is men that are free to be themselves, and I think that's where it just gets lost so much. And it really hurts my heart, because it's the equivalent of women feeling like they have to be skinny and but also have big boobs, and also be tall but not too tall, not don't be taller than a man, You can't wear heels if you're a tall woman because you'll be taller than a man. And, you know, you've got to have the right voice. Don't be too masculine. Don't be too feminine because then you're ditzy. You've got to come across as smart, but it's the equivalent. And we've done it to each other.
Yeah. And do you know what? Like take all of that confusion that happens with like the binary genders, and then add in then add in like being transgender, and like all of the sexualities, all of the like all the different genders. Just how confusing is it going to be for, like, I mean, I'm a cis guy, you're a cis woman, and like how confusing is it going to be for those people
I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine. First of all, well, I imagine you know who you are, but society is probably what makes it the most complicated thing ever. Because just as a cis woman, I don't know who I am sometimes, you know, and I can't imagine having that on top. It's
having that added dysphoria and confusion of just being like something's wrong, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Who I saw a tweet the other day from someone. It was a very confusing tweet. They were a trans woman.
Okay.
But in high school, they knew they weren't gay, but they wanted to be with guys.
Okay.
But they made themselves date women because they wanted to appear straight. How confusing is that? Imagine living like that.
Good Lord. That is mind-blowing. Like, so they're like literally being like, I'm not gay, but I'm attracted to men. And the reason why is because
they're a trans woman.
She was a straight trans woman.
Yeah.
That's... Yeah.
I had to read that tweet like 4 or 5 times, and I was like, so she's straight trans woman that was trying to not be gay.
I mean, that is like, I'd like have that level of confusing, which is a confusing sentence, never mind anything else, and then add the societal pressures onto it
on top of being a man.
Yeah, you know, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and it's amazing. And like you see so many, especially lots of from personal experience, I know a lot of trans women that have come from like the army, because they went to the army to try and reject themselves, go and be the macho person, and then you realize that they're not, and that's okay. And it's so inspiring as well, like to see somebody go through that and that realization. And like I remember seeing a friend of mine on Twitter, an amazing trans man, and just seeing the absolute ecstasy on his face when he'd got his breast removed, and just like literally just a video of him topless. And
I've seen TikToks like that, and I've just cried with them on TikTok. Yes.
And how, like, I retweeted it immediately. I was like, how dare people try and take this level of joy away from people? How dare they? This is pure.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're living in it's better than it was.
It's on the way to the right path. It's on the way to the right path.
I'm going to look at the positives. It's better than it was.
Yes.
I've never lived that, so I can't speak for something I've never lived, but you know, there's probably a lot of things that I don't know, and I can't talk about it, but it's better than it was from my point of view, that it's a lot more. I think it very much depends. Like people, like we say, religion, where you come from, what country you're in.
Mm-hmm. And also like, and that's a confusing thing in itself, because like I remember, like I said, was raised Catholic, and I remember a conversation with my mother actually, where she'd found my porn stash which is hilarious in and of itself because it was like cuttings from magazines that I'd found in bushes that I'd stuck to bits of paper.
How did we all find porn in bushes? Because I did on the way home from school once as well.
Yeah, and do you know what? I can't lie. There's a certain amount of romance in that I look back at, and I'm just like, oh, no one's ever going to know that now because it's so freely available. Like, then they're not going to find that little glimmer of treasure. The closest thing I felt to being a pirate was finding a porn magazine in a bush.
Honestly, I'd find it on the way home and I'd find it almost like offensive. I went to an all-girls school. Yeah. And I was like, who put this in the bushes outside an all-girls school on the way home?
Confound them. That's it. Oh, you're there going, this is disgusting, and just looking. Oh, no, turning the page.
Well, girls would pretend not to be interested.
Of course they would.
Most other girls would boys would be like, wah, boobs, because there's a boys' school around the corner, and they'd be like, they would pick it up and look at it.
Yeah.
Whereas girls would be like, oh, it's disgusting, and pretend like not to be interested.
Intrigued, yeah.
Because that's kind of how we were supposed to be, I guess. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I can get that. Like you've just got like the toxic cis boy who is super into porn, whether they like it or not, and I think that's definitely something that warped my view of cis women when I was growing up, and by warped I mean in favor of. Like, I used to idolize women because I just saw them as aloof creatures, some elegant elven maidens who I was like, oh, I am not worthy of being near you because you are so aloof and I am so attracted to boobs. Like, it was just like...
That's so lovely, though. Like, I don't know. I can't speak for guys. I just don't feel like that's most men's experience.
But, probably not. But I think that's like down to a very much a self-confidence thing of younger Valen Vain. But it was an interesting one to like see, and it definitely was toxic in its own way, because when I got with like, I finally got a girlfriend, say, this was long before I even considered the idea of being with anybody other than women, like, I would put them on a pedestal. I'd be like, you are divine, you cannot do anything wrong, this is, oh my lord, the angels weep on the floor that you walk upon. And that was toxic in itself, because it just meant that I would see them at a certain level, and because of them and all of the stuff we've talked about, the way that society puts cis women down and like says you'll never be good enough and stuff like that, they'd look at my expectations of them and say, oh, I can never be that, even though they were already hitting that.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why I always say, like, never put anybody on a pedestal, meet people on an equal footing, because if you put somebody on a pedestal, they will never see themselves the way that you see them.
I can relate to that. Like, I spent a lot of time in past relationships not feeling good enough, and what they wanted. But then at the same time, like, you could it does come around full circle. I'd probably blame it on porn, because I would then look at that and see this imagery of something that I would never be able to, like, live up to.
But that's and it's such a weird thing, because of the fact that porn is taboo and it's stuff that people don't like to talk about and stuff like that. If people just openly talked about it, people would look at it and be like, this is like a Marvel movie. Like, nobody looks at a Marvel movie and goes, well, that's like my day-to-day life. Like, it's the same with porn. Like, you shouldn't look at porn and be like, that's exactly what sex is like. Because it's not at all. Every
now and then, if, like, I do happen to watch some porn, I look at it now and I must be getting old. I'm like, that's uncomfortable. That counter must be cold. Yeah. Well, why would you sit like that? Like, no.
And it's hilarious because having
not sexy.
Yeah. Having met loads of porn stars now, and like knowing porn actors and cam girls and stuff, they're just like, yeah, this is really uncomfortable. This one, oh, geez, I pulled a muscle in my leg, and I'm just like, what? Like, this is...
Why?
Well, it's aesthetically beautiful. For the camera angle, it looks really pleasurable. And I'm like, yeah. It also, like, from an analytical point of view, looks like there's a variety of pelvises smashing together that are probably is not comfortable for anybody
Just
involved.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like the cold work surface of a kitchen and, like, all these components. I get really irritated by it. I'm just like, just take her clothes off properly. Come on.
Yeah.
Like,
I did,
just
amusingly...
take your time.
I did have a friend of mine who I won't say who they are, but they're a porn actor, and they said that they'd finally got to they knew when they'd made it, because they finally got to a point where they demanded that hair dryers be put on the countertops. So they'd spray the hairdryer on the countertop to warm it up before a scene. I was like, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. Like that's a level of just beauty.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, you would, wouldn't you? It's just like, this is something that I've got to do. Come on now. Like, let's make it at least comfortable, you know?
Really don't blame them. But yeah, it just comes full circle. We do so much of this to ourselves. And I think by podcasts like this, which is like communicating, openly talking, starts discussion, and in a really healthy way, like no one is better than anyone, and everyone's experience is going to be different, and I can only speak from my experience, and you can only speak from yours, and you're going to have many more guests, which I'm excited to listen to other people's experiences, you know, and learn from them, so that I can guide myself through the world, having a little bit more understanding of people that are not like me, which is what the world needs.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And that is one of the things that I'm most excited about in regards to doing this entire podcast and stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes. I've definitely booked in a few amazing guests. And yeah, we'll just see how it all goes. And do you know what? That's actually a brilliant way to round up the episode. Absolutely round up the episode. So yeah, thank you very much. I'll throw out some thank yous first. Because I don't want to miss them. First of all, massive thank you to Kate Sway, who did the opening graphic for the podcast. To Alexander Devenport, who's done all of the video backgrounds for the podcast itself as well, and to Mountain Goat, who wrote the theme tune. A massive thank you to my absolutely beautiful guest, the beautiful Ruby True. Ruby, tell them where they can find you, please.
You can find me on Twitch at Ruby True, Instagram Ruby_True, Twitter Ruby_True. Just search Ruby True around. I'm not the hotel. There's a hotel called Ruby True.
There's a okay. I wish that had come up earlier. All right, laugh with that one. Oh my lordy, fantastic. Well, I'm sure I will try and get you back on the podcast at some stage, Ruby, because it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you as always. And of all of the things that I was planning on talking about today, I think we've got through like 3 of them, which is amazing, because always over prepared. You know what I mean?